Well, in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Bailey will continue to let others in. If you have not taken a minute to respond to the poll questions, please do so. And I was informed that on question number 2, if that does not apply, just hit other because we don't have an NA option. If you will also please put your name and contact information in the chat, and hub members, if you will remember to put an asterisk in front of your name. Just welcome to today's session. I hope that everybody noticed that we are recording today's session. It will be shared on Canvas as well as the Institute's YouTube page that is linked to our web page. We are hoping that you will turn on your cameras. This is a really interactive community. It makes it easier to see everybody's faces. Remember 18 months ago when we all saw people's faces and now we don't. So the more interactive we can be, the better is that. Again, case narratives are a great way to just solidify any information and get information from our colleagues. So if you have an interesting case or a puzzling case, please reach out to either Early Echo or directly to Kate Bennington. She helps us with our case presentations. When you are doing a case or talking about anything, take into account that individual privacy, avoid using first or last names or any identifiable examples or situations with that. Please take a minute to rename your profile with your name, your state, your organization, or also what your occupation is. By now, we all know Zoom, but once again, there are some features to raise your hand. You can always put things into the chat. Curt and Bailey monitor the chat for us. So if there are questions, they see those. Pre-registration, I know we've had a couple of unforeseen things with our registration. So if you ever have any questions about that, email Early Echo. We are trying to send confirmations out the date of. To get the credit for attendance, we send out those surveys at the end. It comes either the day of or a couple of days after. Check your junk email, but as soon as those are filled out, we mail out the certificate of attendance. If you have any questions about that, please email or reach out to myself or Curt Phillips, and we will get those taken care of. Canvas is our site that we have all of our recordings, PowerPoints, any additional information, and the case recommendations. So please, if you have not accessed Canvas or you need an invite for that, please email Early Echo or Curt Phillips at USU. Again, case studies are just that great way to learn more about best practices, gain information from colleagues who may be experiencing some of those same situations. We'd love to have anybody share information about a case study. We are on Facebook and Instagram, so if you have not taken a minute to follow us, please do so. We share information. We also share upcoming sessions or any of that information that we find out. I'm thrilled today to introduce Nancy for us. She is going to be talking to us about self-care. She brings a wealth of information, and I'm not going to take any more of her time. I'm going to just turn it right over to her. So I will stop sharing and let you take that over, Nancy.
Thank you very much, Janelle. Hi, everyone. I'm Nancy Goins, or as my name tag says, Nancy Surbrook-Goins. Okay, can you see my slideshow? Okay, yeah. that went really fast. I didn't expect it to flip over that quickly. So we're going to talk about self-care during uncertain times. And really, these are self-care tips that you can use at any time. But during this time period, especially after COVID, there's probably a lot going on that you feel yourself carrying some tension and some stress. And so we're just going to spend some time talking about self-care. Please feel free to, again, to put your questions in as we go. And as we come together today, as we do a short welcome, I'm going to invite you to take a couple deep breaths. And when you are taking these deep breaths, when you breathe in to the count of 4, and then breathe out to the count of 6. And as you're doing this, and do it at your own pace for about 3 or 4 times, and just let your thoughts come and go. Don't act on them. Don't make a list. Don't say, I got to do that later. Just let them float in and out of your mind, just to help you get grounded in our session today. Okay, thank you for spending that little bit of time doing some self-care for yourself. That really was a self-care technique, and I invite you to use that at any point in time during your day. We're going to talk about stress a little bit today, some self-care tips and tricks that you can use, reflections and sharing, and then any next steps that you might want to take based on the information shared. And I think I forgot to let you all know where I'm from during all of that. I am actually, when Janelle contacted me, I was working in Michigan as the CSPD, Continuous System of Personnel Development Manager for Early Intervention and 619 Early Childhood Special Education. And since then, I have transitioned to AnLar, which is an education management company that does a number of different projects, but I continue to do technical assistance around early intervention, early childhood special education, and self-care is one of those areas that is near and dear to my heart. So when I was asked to present to you, I was very excited to share. So I'd like to ask you, if you wouldn't mind putting in chat, when was the last time you were stressed out? Share in chat. If you want to unmute, you can do that as well. But just sharing, when was the last time you were stressed out? Ongoing on a daily basis, this morning, last night, yesterday, 5 minutes ago, at the end of the month for paperwork, all of the time. Yeah, these are some great answers. Yes, being stressed out is a part of our daily life. I would have to agree with many of you. Last night also was a big stress out night for me. I have no idea why, but sleep was not going to happen for whatever reason. So I do understand being stressed out. So when we talk about self-care and we recognize, I love that last comment. When was the last time I was not stressed out? Good one. So when we think about what is self-care, it's not the first thing you think of. You're thinking of your infants, toddlers, your families, other team members, your supervisors, your own family members. You're thinking of everything else other than self-care, which is why the answers that you just provided in chat are where they're at, because it isn't something that you think about that often. And so the quote for today is, self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. And the only way to get to what's best of you is to have some of that self-care and that self-preservation. And how do we do that? What does it look like? So what is self-care? Before we go into some techniques on how you do it, really, it's an activity that you do deliberately in order to take care of yourself. And taking care of yourself means mentally, emotionally, and physically, all of those areas. Socially, spiritually, a number of different areas, but it's an activity that you do deliberately to take care of yourself, not something you necessarily stumble upon. It's the key to improving your mood and reducing your anxiety. It's the key to good relationships with yourself and others, and it's a key to a balanced life. It's something that you use to refuel yourself, and it's about staying healthy, being aware of what depletes you, and then taking steps to replenish in those areas. So it's a bit of self-knowledge as well, and we'll talk about how do you gain that, but it is something that you do plan for. So if we're looking at what self-care is not, and I hear this a lot of times that they think self-improvement, I'm taking a course to improve being mindful, and that's self-care. Mindfulness is a portion of self-care, and if it's part of your deliberate task, it could be self-care, but taking a self-improvement course to learn how, the course itself isn't necessarily self-care. The self-improvement task isn't self-care. What you get out of it very well could be, and how you integrate that in very well could be, but the act of self-improvement is not self-care. It's something that you force yourself to do. It's not something that you force yourself to do. It's not selfish. It's not any numbing behavior. So it's not drinking, smoking, eating, watching too much TV, Netflix binging, social media surfing, anything in excess that's not considered self-care. Trying to impress people by overextending yourself, committing to lots of different things and not being able to fulfill the commitments, not what we would consider self-care. Shopping without regard to your budget, again, not self-care. And retreating from positive relationships or isolating yourselves. Now, all of these things I can attest to probably doing at some point in time as it's something that I felt was self-preservation. But it is not considered self-care. And there are other ways that we'll talk about and how you can actually care for yourself without resorting to these types of behaviors that can be ultimately damaging in the long run if you always go back to them. So in a nutshell, self-care is the things you do to protect, maintain, and improve your health and well-being. So those things that you do, can you think of anything that you might engage in that you do to protect, maintain, and improve your health and well-being? If you just want to add it in chat. Exercise, yeah. All right, those of you that don't exercise, I can see your eyes rolling, just saying. Running, hikes, hot baths, taking the dogs for a walk, counseling, excellent. Calling my sister, I love that one. Time with loved ones, exercise, sleep, nutrition, taking a bath, all of those things. So we're sharing what you do. Why might it be important for you? Just made that connection of all that stress you're under and that how might some of these self-care things help with that stress? To recharge, absolutely. You feel better after you've been outside. Yep. Gets me into new scenery. I have to say, I don't see as much of the outdoors as I did before I worked remotely. When before all of this and I was going outside more often, I don't see as much of it now, which is not a good thing on any level. So calms the mind, spending time with dogs gives permission to just be in the moment. Absolutely. So you need to take care of yourself before you take care of anyone else. And this analogy, the analogy I like to use with this screen is really what you hear when we used to be able to fly places, and now you can a little bit more, but you always hear the flight attendant say, put your seatbelt on first. And that is the truth. You want to take care of yourself first, because if you're not able to care for yourself, you can't take care of anyone else to the fullest ability that they may need. So a little bit on why we want to make sure that we're engaging in self-care. You all talked about the stress that you feel. Stress leads to anxiety, which ultimately will lead to overwhelm, which I would venture to guess many of you may be on that border right now. But then it leads to burnout, which really leads to compassion fatigue, which is not a healthy place to be. That's when you're thinking that this job is too much. The trauma of carrying all the stress of the families that I work with and the children that I want to just leave. Life is hopeless. I don't want to be in this position anymore, and wanting to find a new position. And that really isn't the goal of being in early intervention and working with families. The goal is to be helpful and help children and families. And we want to keep you in a state where you feel like you're being helpful, not that you're burning out and doing too much for others and not doing enough for yourself. So some common symptoms of compassion fatigue. You have a sense of failure, self-doubt, sadness, loss of sleep, difficulty concentrating, feeling overwhelmed, emotional numbness, you're isolating and withdrawing. So as you think about those comments you put in the beginning to all your stress, just kind of think about if you are feeling any of these symptoms as well. Is your stress getting to a point where it might be causing fatigue? And you don't need to put anything in chat about that or anything, but just think to yourself, where am I on that spectrum? As we talk about some things that we can use to help increase our self-care. So there are 6 types of self-care that I like to focus on. And there was a handout that went along with this. It just kind of walks through these different self-care areas, and it's kind of like a goal and objective sheet that you can use at your leisure to set goals, and we'll talk about how you might do that. But in looking at the 6 types, the first 2 on the slide, physical care and emotional care. So physical care is what you put in the chat box as far as exercise. It doesn't have to include exercise though. It can be eating more fruits and vegetables. It can be drinking more water, going on a walk. Some of you had shared going on a walk with your dog. That's considered physical care. Yoga, different things like that, all considered physical care. Then our emotional care, becoming more in tune with your emotions. This can include journaling, practicing mindfulness and meditation, setting boundaries, being creative, practicing gratitude, changing your negative self-talk. All of those are areas that you would engage in for emotional care. Next to spiritual care and intellectual care. Spiritual care does not have to be religious, but it can be. This is really where you're nourishing your soul. You're striving for inner peace, and you're seeking to find your purpose and your meaning in life. This is more important to some than it is others. All of these are, but you want to have some practices where you are spending some time in nature or writing in a gratitude journal or something in the area of that spiritual care, nourishing your soul, donating to a charity, spending time with a charity, practicing meditation. And then your intellectual care, really doing something that nourishes and challenges your mind. So reading a book, completing a puzzle, learning a new language, watching a documentary, all those areas fall within that intellectual care. And the last 2 are social care. We are social beings. We want to be connected to others. So making sure that we have that social connections, time with loved ones, lunch with a friend, striking up a conversation with a stranger, and then your sensory, helping nourish your senses, which really your warm baths, scented candles, time in nature, that music, barefoot on the grass, all those different types of things where you're focusing on your sensory care. So of those 6, what type of self-care is speaking to you the most right now? As I reviewed, and I did go through those kind of quickly, but really which one is kind of resonating with you is, oh, I never thought of that. I might need to spend a little more time in that area. You just want to add that and put it in chat. Social, I need more of that. I need more of that. Physical, sensory, social, educational, intellectual, and sensory. I'm noticing a lot of sensory. I don't think that many of us realize how the sensory factor is really important in our self-care. So the next thing I want to talk a little bit about is our energy, work, rest, and recovery. And this piece I want to talk about because when we think of recovery, recovery doesn't necessarily equate or equal rest. So if we've been in front of the computer all day in meetings or sitting all day in meetings and we're feeling exhausted, and I can attest to this happens quite often, in front of the computer in meetings all day, I'm feeling exhausted. So I think, and what feels good, what I feel my body is craving is just to take a nap. In all actuality, if my body has been passive, or if any of our bodies have been passive for long periods of time, rest really is activity, being active, moving our body. That is what is considered rest when we've been passive all day. I like to share that a lot, because that was when I was getting into this and doing research on it. That was really one misconception that I had. That, if I feel like I need to take a nap, maybe I should take a nap. And it's not that there isn't power in that feeling, but at the same time, if I've been sitting all day and I feel like I need to take a nap, it's my brain that's tired, and I really need to move my body to regenerate and to have that recovery time. So the first one on here talks about the physical activity. If you've been active, you want to have a passive recovery. You want to read a book and take a nap. If you've been inactive and sitting for long periods of time, then you want to do something that is more active, walking, a low intensity workout, yoga, something to get your body moving. Emotionally as well, you look at if you've been spending a lot of time working with your families, that might be emotionally draining, then you want to do something that's more passive, which might be journaling about your emotions, or something meditative, or some humor or laughter, something in that area which isn't as heavy emotionally. So really looking at the opposite of what you're doing. If you've been doing mental tasks like proofreading or creating content, and you're tired from that, then you want to do something on the opposite end, which would be more doing more talking and those pieces where it isn't as intensely mental. And so spirituality, regularly revisiting our deep feelings, and are holding ourselves accountable, those types of things, making sure that what we're doing, that we're actually recovering, so that we're getting benefit from the activity that we're doing. So, in ways that we can practice self-care, just talking about formulating goals. What do you want to see for yourself in the self-care areas, in the 6 that we ran over, or in any of just 1 or 2, or whatever works for you? And once you've set some of those goals, setting up objectives to get you to that goal and tracking your progress. So when you're looking at goals, being realistic, making sure you're looking at your schedule, starting small and working your way up. Maybe one goal might be to go for a 10-minute walk at the end of the day. Something that's manageable. If you're setting a goal, make sure that it's something that you feel good about and that you feel that you can achieve. Make it a priority. And you can set a long-term goal or a short-term goal, whatever works for you. And then when you're looking at objectives for that goal, you can use I statements, be as specific as possible, and then making sure that they're short, brief, and to the point. And really, these are all suggestions. If writing goals really isn't something you want to do for yourself, don't worry about it. Write objectives, or just say, I'm going to work on this, and like, I'm going to work on being more active. And one way I'm going to do that is walking for 5 minutes a day. Those types of things, just small little increments to help you move towards better self-care. And then you track your progress, keep a record. You can use a Fitbit, make a checklist, recognize your accomplishments. That's the other piece that's super important. If your goal is to work out 5 days a week and you do it 3, recognize that you were able to fit it into your day 3 days that week. And as much as it may not have been the actual goal, you made progress towards it. So recognizing what you've achieved and making some type of celebration around that. And then, okay, so course correct. What can you do differently to improve upon that the next week? Why did it work? What might need to be changed? But also celebrating and recognizing the effort that you put in. If there's no achievement or recognition, we tend to be really hard on ourselves, be really negative, and not want to continue to move forward. And then we end up giving again to everybody else and not to ourselves. So here are some examples of maybe objectives or goals, depending on how you want to look at it. One way to start practicing self-care might be to unplug from news and social media for a few days. That might be one goal that you set up, or one way that you decide this is important to me. I'm going to unplug and not be as available to know what's going on in the world. Another thing you might decide to do is recognize when you're in need of self-care and then respond to what's needed. So listening more to your body, how can you respond? Or having a self-care checklist with dozens of options that are tailored to you. And when you need self-care, doing one of those options. And really the golden rule to get started is make it an active choice, decide you're going to do it, make a plan, and just start working towards it. Be aware of what you do and why you're doing it and how it feels, so you can evaluate if you're successful or not. And then just stick to the basics and work one thing in at a time. And when it becomes routine, you can work another thing in to your routine. Or if you start doing something like walking every day and it doesn't feel right, try something different. So your basic checklist, and I think the next one is the checklist that I really like. So this is a self-care checklist that I found online, and really it's got the date, when it was done first, and then the next iteration. And really these are all the choices that this person came up with that they could do for self-care. So at any point in time, they could go for a walk, make something, hang out with the cat. And then they also went as far as to make a list for when I might feel. And then if they felt anything on this list, they would choose one of these self-care activities to engage in. And that could be as simple as that for starting your journey into increasing your self-care. It doesn't have to be this long, drawn out process. It can be just where you're at and what works for you to try. So I included a self-reflection activity and a handout that you can use whenever you have some time and you want to take a look at it. And really each of those 6 areas that we talked about are on the sheet. And it gives you, again, the example of what physical care is. You see about half of it here, and then some examples. You just set one goal and then maybe 1 or 2 objectives for each of those areas. And you don't have to do all 6, but you can. And this just kind of gives you a worksheet to work off of, to just kind of set those goals and to see some progress. It's just for your use. Use it to however you see fit. If it doesn't fit with the way your mind works or the way you see self-care, then don't use it at all. It's just a tool that I found to be helpful, and everybody works a little differently. So if it's helpful to you, please use it. If it's not, no big deal. So I want to touch a little bit on self-care in the workplace, because I feel that a lot of groups that I've been talking to around the country have, especially in early childhood, have really felt that this tremendous amount of stress in the workplace since we've been doing some all over the place. It's a little different. Some people are still doing hybrid and doing, virtual home visits and different things like that. And then in other areas, it's all face-to-face. And so they're dealing with the year of not having services with families and coming into their home face-to-face. So the stress levels are all over the place from what I've noticed. And so we really wanted to look at how can we integrate this more in the workplace to support our colleagues as well. And these are just some ideas that you could possibly do with your coworkers. Having a touch base meeting just to say, hey, how you doing? Anything you want to talk through or share with me or anything like that. Doing some internal support for each other, sharing kind of where you're at with things, and then inviting others to share with you where they're at. A lot of times, even if you all just shared where your stress level was, even if you're in the same boat with your colleagues and you're all being a little stressed, there is comfort in knowing others are feeling the same. So that alone will reduce your stress level a bit. starting a wellness program or a wellness committee to improve the wellness within your agency or within your workplace. If you're able to, having some flexible hours that allows for you to get some of your family stuff done as well during the day instead of not having that ability to do that, or encourage some of these conversations to happen maybe at a staff meeting or a staff discussion. Just some opportunities to integrate some of this care into the workplace so that you're able to care for each other in a way that makes sense while you're caring for yourself. So as you think about this, if you wouldn't mind putting in chat, how could you support your team in self-care? Checking in and offer help, listening, being there to listen, being willing to listen, reaching out, just listening and letting coworkers unload about personal work stressors in the moment. Yep. Checking in with coworkers. Our office has a sunshine committee. They provide treats and uplifting notes. I like that. Demonstrating it's a priority. Calling instead of emailing. That's a good one. Finding out what works for them and managing stress and support them by encouraging those activities. Nice list. One more. Responding to messages as soon as possible. And I hear you on that one. That is really important. Have a weekly Zoom meeting because we're all over the state. It's a great way to stay connected. Absolutely. Yeah, we forget how much connection means, and connection, that social piece is super important during this time, especially with those doing similar work. So that's really the tips and tricks that I had around self-care. If you would like to learn any more, or if you would like to have some time really formulating some of those goals and objectives, feel free to contact me. I also do health and wellness coaching. So you can reach me at my email address, either nancysurbrook-goins@gmail.com or my business, Sankafa Health and Wellness @gmail.com. I'm happy to do anything that you would like, or just answer questions, and no restrictions on when you email me. I'll be happy to respond to whatever questions you might have around health and wellness. If it's for in your workplace or just for you, happy to help out. I went through a lot of that quickly because I know that I didn't have a ton of time. Are there any questions?
So I don't know if anybody wants to unmute and just ask those questions if you have those. It was just great information.
Well, thank you everyone for your time today. It's been wonderful spending some time with you. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and I'll let you get on with your agenda.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
So we are up for our case presentation, and our case presenter today is Curt Phillips. Curt, you might have to talk so I can see you.
Can you see me now?
Yes. Okay.
Not much to look at, but it is what I got. So,
well, it is good. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. Can everybody see my screen now?
I can see it.
Okay, Curt.
Perfect.
Go.
Thanks, Janelle. So today's a little different than the typical case presentations. In the typical case presentations, we're presenting about maybe a kid or a situation that we have. Today, Janelle's asked that I present a little bit on staff retention and recruitment, and then have a discussion about that. I think it's probably a big topic in a lot of programs, especially in early intervention. I know it has been here in the program that I am part of up here in northern Utah. So first of all, just to introduce myself, my name is Curt Phillips. I do some administration and some direct service provision here in the early intervention program and also at the Institute for Disability Research Policy and Practice at Utah State University. Go ahead, Janelle. So the topic today is around retention and recruitment of employees. And so just a couple of definitions. Definition of retention is an organization's ability to keep its employees. And my definition of recruitment is what you have to do if you're not successful with retention. We see, I've been here over 20 years at in the early intervention program here in northern Utah, and have seen a lot of people come and go. Some stay for a long time. There's about 3 or 4 of us that have been here 20 plus years, and the rest have kind of cycled through. But the question is, and hopefully in some of the conversations we'll have in our breakout groups, some of these questions that I posed at the bottom of the slide, what are the trends historically versus recently? And I think most of us could probably look to our parents or our grandparents and see a different way of going about job hunting or your time with a job. My grandfather lived up in southeastern Idaho. When he was about 21 years old, he got a job working in a mine and worked in the mine his whole life and farmed on the side. And when he turned whatever age, I don't know what age it was, probably in his 60s somewhere, he stopped doing the mining and he had a pension, and he continued to receive that pension while he continued to farm until he couldn't farm anymore. My other grandfather taught school, worked from being a teacher to a principal, was at the same high school for all but 2 of his years of his career. He was there for about 40 years, stayed in that job. You'll see in one of the coming slides, the statistics are much different now. And so questions we're looking at is, why is there such a difference now? And how do we go about solving this issue? The statistics I'll show you will explain why it's important that we do our best to solve the issue of retention. Go ahead, Janelle. So with regard to the retention of employees, here's just some statistics that I found. And I just pulled them off various websites that have done either studies or government websites of that. And this first statistic is all employees. So this isn't salaried employees. This isn't employees with college degrees. This is just employees in general. And 1/3 of employees will quit after about 6 months. The average time with an employer for a salaried employee is about 4.5 years. 75% of the reasons why employees leave can be prevented. The cost is 33% of the annual salary to replace an employee, and 94% of employees indicate that they would stay longer if the company invested time in helping them to learn. And this kind of paints that picture for us, right? People are coming, they're not staying for long periods of time, but it is preventable. And 94% of employees indicating that they would stay longer if the company invested time helping them to learn their job, for me, sounds like something that we could do something about. So as a part of this case study today, that's what we want to try to talk about amongst ourselves. Go ahead to the next slide, Janelle. So the retention of employees, top reasons for leaving. Number 1 is they're not challenged at work, or there's a lack of career development. They're underappreciated, there's poor management practices, or it's just a bad cultural fit. And this link that you have right here, I will post in the chat. It's a really good article about what keeps people and how managers can be able to help their employees have a desire to stay longer. It's one that Janelle shared with me several weeks or months ago. And as I read it and sent it out to others that work here in the Institute, it received a lot of really positive reviews, things that we may not think about. A lot of times people think the reason people leave is because of a lack of salary or money, but that is actually fairly low on the list as far as the reasons people leave. You can see these top reasons here don't have anything to do with the salary, although obviously it is a factor. It isn't typically one of the top factors. Go ahead, Janelle. So when we talk about the retention of employees, here's a few of the things that lead to poor retention. This first bullet point's a little misleading. It talks about a poor onboarding procedure. Now, the little part after that says it leads to 69% of employees staying at least 3 years. That's not a poor onboarding procedure. That's if the onboarding procedure is effective and is deemed valuable to the employee, 69% of the employees will stay at least 3 years. Another reason people leave is poor communication between the administration and the employees. That can be partly unclear job descriptions. It can be a lack of recognition by managers. Also an unwillingness to provide feedback. I think sometimes in administrative positions, we feel like if we give constructive feedback, that people will become angry with us, they won't be our friends, and maybe if that's what you're looking for, administration may not be your best job to be in. Most of the employees that have been surveyed find that honest, constructive feedback with proper supports and with tact obviously used when giving that feedback is actually one of the things that will help people stand, because they know exactly where they stand, exactly what they need to do to be effective. Also, inadequate staffing levels. I think most of us in early intervention, even before the coronavirus pandemic, found that the load that we carried as early intervention providers was pretty heavy with the pandemic and having to switch to online visits in a lot of cases, with people leaving for whatever reason. We found that the load has increased quite a bit. And then the last one, inflexible working hours. Sometimes this could be taken care of, sometimes it can't. Okay, Janelle. So just a couple of tips for recruiting employees. First off, you need to improve your candidate pool. There's a lot of places out there that their business is improving that candidate pool. I hear them on the radio all the time. If you subscribe with this company, we'll make sure you have 10 applicants within the first few weeks. You can utilize those type of services. You want to hire somebody with experience in the job you're hiring for. Sometimes we hire people just because they're the only warm body that's out there applying for the job. That typically will lead to poor experience for the employee and employer. And a lot of times it leads to short-term employment. We want to look at the in-house candidates first. These are people who know the system, who know how it works, understand exactly what they're getting themselves into. You want to develop your reputation as a great employer. You also want to involve other employees in the hiring process, because that is who the team members will be. Also, obviously, the pay is important. If you've got a competitor that all things are equal, the one with higher pay will typically win out. You want to highlight the benefits when you're recruiting. Hire the smartest person you can find. And then here's my inevitable spelling error. You want to use your Webiste for recruiting. I should say website for recruiting. That way they can see exactly what your program is about and exactly what the expectations are. So rather than just a job description, make sure that website is there in the job description so they can go and look carefully at your program before applying. And then obviously we want to check references to make sure we're not hiring somebody who's been jumping from job to job. All this stuff is on Canvas. You don't need to really even think about this that much. But these are some of the things that are effective when we're looking at recruiting. Okay, go ahead, Janelle, to the next slide. We're getting ready to go into breakout groups. Here's some of the questions, and I'll also post these in the chat. These are the questions that I'd like you to kind of consider in these breakout groups. How would you rate your organization as far as retention of employees? And this doesn't just mean our people coming and going, but what kind of structure or what kind of systems are in place to help employees want to stay on for a long period of time. The second one, what are your main needs as an employee? What is your main focus as an administrator? And it'll be interesting to see how those conversations go, because there are those that are in management or administration on this call or on this project, as well as those who are employees. And so it'll be interesting to see if the needs of the employee match with the focus of the administrators. Then also, what would help you stick around longer as an employer, and what would draw you away to another company? So with that introduction, are there any questions you have before we go to the breakout rooms? Okay. So I will go ahead and copy these into the chat. I'll also put that reference into the chat that I shared earlier. And then I think they're ready for us in our breakout rooms. Janelle?
And then hub members, if you will just remember to take notes and send those in afterwards. We will break out for about 20 minutes and then come back and chat about it.
Janelle. So I posted those. I think they're in the ones.
Just waiting a few minutes while we get everybody. Okay, I think everybody's back. So I'm just gonna call the hub members and from each group, and if everybody will just take a few minutes and share what your groups talked about. So the first person I have on my list is Shelby. So I don't know who took notes or.
I did.
Okay.
We kind of just went through that list of Curt's questions and talked about like some of the more difficult parts, more difficult, I guess, professions that are the most difficult ones that are to hire. So like we talked about how speech paths are generally more difficult to find, occupational therapists, development specialists, and family support specialists. We talked about how sometimes location, pay, the cost of living or the cost of housing in an area can kind of affect being able to either retain or find new prospects for the positions. Let's see, health benefits, the flexibility of the job, the opportunity to collaborate and ongoing training was an important piece that we all felt were what we would need in a position. What would prompt us to stay longer would be recognition for the work that we do, team dynamics, whether there's a generally positive team or and then potential for growth, whether that be through professional development or pay. And yeah, that was generally kind of what we talked about.
Oh, good, great. Rebecca and Kate, what did your group have?
That was Marianne said she would volunteer to report for us.
Okay. Marianne's still on here?
Yes, she's on mute.
I'm on mute. Okay, there we go. We went over a couple of the questions and talked some about it. So we found with retention that it was pretty consistent across our group that younger members that join different teams tend to be at more risk for not retaining their jobs with each organization. But that's the group that tends to move on more, and that people, if they make it through that first 2 or 3 years, that they tend to stay more long-term. We found that the things that helped us from our administrations were the ability to trust us as professionals and be flexible with us and listen to our needs and try to work with us on those. Do you have anything else to add to that? No? Okay. So that's pretty much what we talked about.
Oh, good. Those are good ideas. And I'm loving all of you guys' conversations. So Kirsten is the next one I have. What did your group share?
So we had some of the same things that some of the other people had said. We went through all the questions that Curt had. I think one of the things that came up as really important is feeling appreciated and feeling like your contributions are important, and having that appreciation be genuine. So not just, you know, the little signs posted that say you're great, but somebody really recognizing what your strengths are and appreciating that, and letting you know that they appreciate that. And I think we had some of the same things regarding, as far as things that would make you stick around, is that ability to grow, and feeling supported and appreciated. Flexibility was a big one. Pay and benefits, it goes in there as well, but was not the top of everybody's list, just as Curt said. Having a good ability to take some time off and to regenerate, but also having caseloads being manageable enough to be able to take time off without having it be more stressful to take time off than it is to just work. So, you know, that's probably something that lots of people are dealing with right now. So, and as far as when I asked what would draw you away, I just got, I'm pretty happy right now. You know, we all love our jobs. So, but I think one of the things, just going along kind of with the opposite of what things keep you around, what would draw you away is maybe that potential for growth if you don't have that available in your job. So, and if anybody in my group thinks I missed anything, feel free to speak up.
The article that Curt shared, that was one of the biggest things, was that growth, especially for employees that had been there for longer than that 2 or 3 years. So if you just kind of felt like you didn't have it, and not even just in education, in all fields, that opportunity for growth. So great. Pat, what did your group have, or who shared in your group?
Everybody shared, and of course, I write things down.
Oh, good. I just didn't know if you had anybody else write it down. I guess that's what I should have said, but you did.
So it was an interesting group, and people from, you know, not all Utahns. And I think the biggest thing that hit me was Therese is from Montana, and she said retention, because there's so much competition for employees, where she said something like Macy's is offering $25 an hour. So that's huge, and may not be what we're facing here in Salt Lake City. And then Shauna mentioned that it would be nice, like, wouldn't it be nice to be 40 hours and have benefits and all that stuff, but that she gets to be flexible as a single mom with young children. And that is the beauty. That is what keeps people, is the flexibility within early intervention. And then we had some Marla who said that she was involved in onboarding, and she was very interested in the comments that everybody made, and was interested in knowing what would keep people, because she's also involved in hiring. And I think all programs are kept at a rate of salary that they can offer. So they can't negotiate $25 an hour if the position is 15. But the biggest piece too was being validated by management. And just as Kirsten said, it's not just great job, it's sitting down and itemizing what is going well for you. And when we started all of this, I thought mentoring was a huge piece, and I just hadn't heard it. Nobody had talked about it, but obviously I think everybody is just trying to do their job. And then ultimately they said, yeah, it was hard to watch new people come in and not know what they're doing and flounder and then leave, because that just wasn't part of it. So yeah, it was a good conversation, very good conversation.
Yeah, it is. I think we're all, especially this past year, it's real. I mean, I think we've been dealing with it long term, but this past year, it's brought up kind of those big barriers, just as COVID has for a lot of things with technology and outreach and resources. This is just kind of exacerbated an ongoing concern with it. So great. Barb,
Can I say one more thing?
Yep.
Less technology.
Less technology.
For the old people.
Okay, less technology. There you go.
I
Good.
second the motion.
Okay, and on that note, Barb, you
Too
are
funny.
on that. I was telling Curt your story about your flip phone, so that's why it was funny.
Talk about less technology. But anyway, we had a really good discussion in our group too, and I think a lot of the same things came out. Some different things that, I mean, we had from the administrator's point, finding out that, you know, some people did leave for exactly what many of you have said, that being able to go further, to be challenged and learn new things. And then unfortunately, we had one person who's in a situation of losing people all over the place. And so luckily some other folks from DDI could share some strategies about ways to stay, but it's mainly, I think it kind of goes to some of what others are saying, and please folks jump in if I'm misinterpreting, but it was like there's not really a connection with the people. Many of the new people are being trained with emails or videos or different ways, and so there's a question if they feel competent enough to stay long, or, you know, and there's not a connection with the agency folks. We did also have a question, I'll throw this back to you guys, so as you think about it, that we weren't exactly sure why we were talking about this, if this is to kind of activate providers to speak up, or so I'd like to kind of, and I don't know if you're comfortable sharing that, but I mean, you know, because we did talk about, you know, what would keep you there, what doesn't. So as a provider or an employee, should I feel a little better about going to my boss and saying, hey, you know what, I have a new idea I'd like to share, or if you guys would, if you want to share that. And I don't know from the group, I have a whole page of notes, but I think those were kind of things that were different than we heard from other groups, except for one last thing. Someone told us that's newly out of school, that she was told in school that you should leave your job every 5 years because you'll get better pay and benefits. So we didn't know if that's a common thing out there, but that isn't helping either.
That's weird. I've never heard that. Because I've always heard like that. What Pat was saying is, when you get out of school, find a mentor, somebody who's been there a long term, and do that. And I know in our program here in where I'm at, it's hard to mentor those new people because you don't even know them. I gone to the gym every early morning for the last year, and I saw this person that I thought I knew, and I thought it was a family, and I never wanted to see them because it was at like 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, I don't want to talk to you. Well, to come to find out, it's a new coworker, and because I had not known her, I'd never reached out to her on it. So I think that it's something that we're all struggling with, that reaching, that connectiveness, that mentoring things. Those are all, but that's interesting, Barb, that they said that. Anybody else ever heard changing your jobs?
I've heard that, but they never told us that in school.
No. Well, I definitely have heard it, but not within the context of EI. I've heard it in business, where if you're only going to get promoted and bigger salaries if you leave every 2 or 3 years.
I heard the same thing back when I was working at the hospital, and I've been out of there for like 15 years. New nurses would come in and they would say, why are you still here? Why don't you go somewhere else and get a job somewhere else? Because I stayed there 15 years. But the new nurses coming in out of school would only stay a few years, get trained, and then they'd move on.
Oh, I know we have some admins on the team. How does that make you feel? Sorry, Kate, I just also noticed you came unmuted. So say what you were going to say.
I just was going to say, in school, I never heard it explicitly say you need to change your job. But as our professors would share their background and their experience, they did, I noticed, work in a lot of different areas. And so it was kind of something to aspire to get that diverse experience in different settings.
I did the same in my career. I moved around. I've been an addictions counselor. I've been in juvenile probation. I've been in medical case management. So I did the same. I've worked in domestic violence. So I moved around a lot, and I think it has made me better at my job because I have a better understanding of people's situations. I've worked in food stamp programs. So I think it's more common than administrators realize.
Yeah. Any administrators want to share anything that they've heard during this? Not that I know who administrators are on this call, other than Curt and Marla, because I know them.
I think it's a good discussion, and like Pat said, it was really interesting to hear both sides of it, to say what would really help you to feel appreciated, how would you like that to be shared, and where does it all come into play, because there's so many different parts, from salary to being appreciated to having opportunities to learn and to get real strategies to share with families. And so it was very helpful. Thank you for putting this together.
If I can circle back, I think what one of Barb's original questions is why did we choose this topic for a case study? And I don't know, Janelle, maybe you have a better answer than me, but within early intervention, when we have a lot of turnover, it not just affects the program and the administration and finding people to fill those jobs, but it affects the families that we work with. And so as we look at ways to better serve families, part of that is that job retention and keeping employees there so that there's consistency. Because if you have a kid that, starts with a speech path at, a year old, and then 18 months they switch and they have a different speech pathologist or whatever the case is, the discontinuity in families, it takes that amount of time to rebuild that trust and be able to understand the way that new person goes about things and the family dynamics, and that can be affected. So even though it's not a case study per se where we're problem solving about a specific child or situation, I think we were just trying to problem solve with regard to how we best serve those families with the continuity of care, so to speak.
And also going along with that, early intervention or education in general, that healthcare setting is just a high burnout. And so you have that high turnover, that high burnout. What are some of the things that we do to keep employees for a little bit longer? I just noticed Crystal put in the chat that it takes a good, 2 to 3 years to become a good early intervention specialist. I mean, I would agree. It takes your first year on any job, you're just kind of trying to navigate everything, right? Like you don't really know what you're doing, or so we just all felt as a hub team felt like it kind of went along with that topic of self-care, and how do we, ones that are long-term, how do you keep that burnout from occurring? I think, the one big thing that we're noticing this year is it's the great attrition, right? Everybody long-term is going to these other employees for some of these reasons, that they have job growth, but it's not necessarily around money. It's around job growth, flexibility of hours, better benefits, better connections with them. So I think COVID has really emphasized that across not just education, but all fields are happening with that. So great discussions. Whitney, do I see you raising you were just, there you go. Curt, twirling your hair. There you go. Sometimes you miss those things on Zoom. So when I saw it, I was like, oh, wait. Okay. So next month we are having Kirsten, our PT, is sharing some great information about assistive technology around positioning. So be sure to join that. And we will also be starting our registration for year 2022. Can you guys believe that that's already happening? I have a hard time saying that. But those will be out here in the next, hopefully by December, we'll have the calendar of those. So thank you, everyone. If you will remember to complete your surveys, that really helps provide us some information and be able to share these free of cost to everybody. So complete those and then get your certificate of attendance. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.